Hi, this is Mo Bhandari at Ortho Evidence, and I have the pleasure of having a colleague and friend, Dr. Bill Ristevski, who is an upper extremity surgeon at McMaster University. Bill, you have some exciting news, and I know you've been working on this particular project for some time, so maybe I'll let you tell our members and our community about the DRIVSAFE study.
Thanks very much, Mo. Thanks for having me here today. Yeah. It's really great to be in person too.
Yeah, I know.
Fantastic.
How long has it been?
Too long.
I know, too long.
Too long. But I'm really happy to discuss what our team has put together recently, which is the DRIVSAFE study, which is a study that focused on distracted driving. And we looked at fracture clinic patients that were coming through for injuries and other problems through the fracture clinic, and did an anonymous survey looking at how they perceive distracted driving, whether they engage in it, and what they're here for at the fracture clinic. Is it related to distracted driving? So our results, I thought, were really surprising and even larger than what we thought.
So I would have said, okay, so I'm going to get you to stop there. Most of us would say, okay, distracted driving, probably half the people who are driving are distracted driving. Some of you might say 3/4, but what did you actually find? What percentage of people reported being distracted while driving?
Yeah, it was shocking, actually. It was, I believe, 99.7%. Everyone. I think there was 20 people out of 1,378.
And they're liars.
I don't think they're liars. I think they don't have any insight into when they're distracted.
Right. So because I can have a coffee, I can check my texts, and I can drive. Yeah, I'm not distracted.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Everyone thinks they're capable of doing this.
Yeah.
And every single distracted driving study that we do in simulators or have looked at and stuff show that no one could do this.
Interesting.
We have an inflated sense of what we're capable of, and thinking that we could multitask, which is a complete myth. And our brains aren't hardwired to multitask. It's impossible, actually, for humans to multitask.
Okay, so let me ask you this. When we say distracted, the majority of us think, okay, we're talking about texting, right? We're checking your phone or fuddling around with your phone, right? That's what most of us would think is distracted. That's what I would have presumably thought. Yeah. But what are the other forms of distraction that you identified? And I guess the broader question would be, are they as important? Are they as risky as someone's behaviors? Maybe broadly, like what are the different types of distractions people acknowledge?
Yeah. So I really think you have to break it down, which was done in previous work, that a distraction is anything that diverts your attention or abilities away from the practice of safe driving. And if you think broadly, it could be divided into three things: cognitive, manual, and kind of like visual distractions. But there's other things too, auditory. And so anything that really pulls you away. So that could be talking to children, pressing your GPS, right? Daydreaming, which is a big one that a lot of studies have not really talked about that much. And we were able to obtain some data on that as well. But
most of us at some point have found our way home and had moments really where you're blacked out thinking, I don't know how I got from my office to my home.
100%. I think if you're a driver and you've put on enough kilometers, there has been an event where you end up in your driveway and you're like, I do not recall the last 5 minutes of driving.
Yeah,
that probably happened to me driving over here thinking about the Ortho podcast.
Just being on the podcast distracted you.
Yeah, it probably distracted me just driving over here. So.
Okay, so keep going. Yeah. So I'm sorry. So you said children, phones and all that kind of stuff. Coffee, I imagine.
Coffee, food, drinking, grooming, smoking. People try to read. People try to use their laptops, believe it or not. And obviously, that's a very small percentage. But talking to a passenger, it's kind of mixed reviews. That may be protective in some instances and may be a distraction in some instances. Right. Bluetooth technology, anytime you're having a conversation on your cell phone, even with Bluetooth, you're invested in that conversation. And the person that is talking to you is not like a passenger that might see some kind of construction or something approaching. That passenger will then be quiet because they recognize this is potentially a driving danger. And they may actually just stay quiet and say, hey, watch out for that. And that might be protective. But the person that's on your Bluetooth has no idea you're going through a construction zone. And they keep on jabbering about the dishwasher being broken. And you're thinking about that. And then all of a sudden someone's hitting the brakes on you.
For sure. Okay. So wide amount and variation, what were considered distracted. Were there any factors that were more that stood out to you more from your research in terms of either being predictive of, I mean, the part with the distracted driving is okay. Lots of us have, sort of the near misses. And you think, ooh, holy smokes, that could have been bad, but you didn't. Yeah. And you're driving and you get there. Did you what would be the consequences actually being in an accident or consequences having an injury? Did the study get to some of that, like individuals who had maybe had injuries that reflected back, or did you have any predictors that were more likely to lead to bad outcomes after distracted driving or not? Things like that?
Yeah, in some sense, we did look at some of this. What we did was, after we kind of asked people about what distractions they engage in, we do have the former literature that gave us odds ratios of how dangerous those are in terms of producing a crash.
Okay.
So we looked at their answers and gave them a weighted scale and multiplied that by the odds ratios of the more dangerous ones and the less dangerous ones to get a conglomerate score.
Okay.
So everyone that was in the study got this conglomerate score, and we set the median as the midpoint. Yeah. And everyone below it we labeled as distraction averse, and everyone above it we labeled as distraction prone.
Yeah.
And it turns out that the distraction prone people were twice as likely to get into a motor vehicle crash.
Wow.
Due to distraction than the distraction averse. And that's just dividing the group into half.
Wow.
So that was really instructive and a little bit scary, but it also maybe opened up a future door that we might be able to ask a few questions that may predict someone's risk maybe in the future, and kind of figuring that out so that maybe we could target education programs to people that are at high risk. So, and we did do some regression analyses that showed some other factors that were associated with distracted driving or crashing.
Right. So, for example, more likely to be distracted if you're younger in age, older in age?
Younger in age.
Younger in age. Yeah. Are there any other just broad
So
predictor?
you were more likely to be in the distraction prone group, I believe, if you were younger age and had a higher household income. And you're more likely to be in a distracted driving crash if you, I believe, were an older age, actually, and kind of in this middle income level.
Interesting.
But some of that is a little bit flawed, because you think if someone's been driving for 40 years or 30 years or 25 years, they're more likely to be in an event, even though they may be a safer driver than someone who's just starting out, potentially.
Just number of hours on the road.
Correct. Yeah. Right. So some of these stats are kind of get washed out in experience and all other things, but it definitely has been a theme in the literature where younger drivers are at more risk of being distracted. Right. And it's the AAA in the States did a study, I believe, where they were videotaping teenagers.
Yeah.
And they looked at all the crashes. I think they had over 1,700 of them. Now, there's some bias here. There's a camera in your car that you know about.
Oh, for sure. Well, that's going to change behavior.
Yeah. This is the scary thing, though. They thought 58% of the crashes were involved with distractions.
Yeah.
And I think the stat was, out of the last 6 seconds preceding a crash, their eyes were off the road for 4.1 seconds, which is pretty scary. That's wow. You're blind.
You're blind. Yeah, you're driving blind. 4 seconds is a lot when you're going.
That's a lot. That's like you're covering multiple football fields.
Yes. Yeah.
Of distance in that time.
Yeah. Right.
So right. That's a bit scary, and it just gets progressively worse, because if you're distracted, you're less likely to hit the brakes.
Oh, for sure.
Less likely to make an evasive maneuver. So the injuries that are associated with distracted driving, there's some evidence to suggest that these are actually worse injuries, high energy injuries. And that's what really led me to this topic was, fixing people that are broken from high energy injuries. Can we make a difference, or can we change it somehow? And there's many nights where we're up, fixing open fractures, let's say, from high energy injuries. And I'm like, wow, maybe if you didn't receive that text, or, maybe you weren't distracted, maybe you wouldn't be here in the hospital today. Absolutely.
And having done the amount of work you've done in this study, and then just to be clear, this study is out now, right? Early release at Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. So we'll make sure we do a ACE report for this and get that message out to our readership as well. But
thank you.
But in this work you've been doing, you must have thought, you clearly thought deeply about this issue. What can we do to limit those distractions? The reality is, you're in cars now that are built almost in some ways, I wouldn't say they're necessarily encouraging it, but boy, oh boy, you've got the most comfortable coffee holders. Like they're encouraging you to do all these things, right? You've got all kinds of dashboards that for some cars are more complicated than your laptop, right? You're fiddling around all the time. So how does one become distraction averse in this day and age?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, like around the world, this is causing over $1 trillion worth of devastation every year, and that's on top of the people that are getting injured. That's just the economic factors that kind of lead to that, including people that can't work anymore and have been injured so badly that they've lost their jobs, and all these critical things that we sometimes take for granted. But how do you stop that? It's great. There's a lot of countermeasure research that's going on, and some of it's pretty cheeky, maybe using the phone to try to stop you from driving distracted, like sending people messages, hopefully when they're not moving in a vehicle, and trying to alter behavior. But everything's with mixed results. Probably the best are the education ones, where people have been educated and shown what distracted driving can do. And we've done some other work on this, looking at websites and videos to kind of see what the general message is out there. And it tends to focus on death and the really serious outcomes, and it almost ignores injury and chronic disability. So giving people those tidbits of information, saying that you could really get hurt badly and really alter your life, not only get killed or kill someone else or really hurt someone else. And that seems to resonate with some drivers in the literature in terms of like making some behavior changes, but it's variable, and it's usually short term, and the long term studies, people tend to revert. So the active measures are failing. The laws changing, handheld device laws, banning that are still not doing the job. So I really think we're going to have to probably move to some kind of passive restraint system.
And I think there's like a cognitive dissonance, truly. Like I think there's this perception that, I can do it, but that kind of stuff doesn't happen to me. Like, there's this disconnect from, well, I know bad things can happen, but I'm going to justify it. You know why I'm going to justify it? Because, I'm busy. I got a lot of stuff on the go, and I've got to grab my food because I can get to work earlier. Oh, I'm going to make myself more efficient. I'm going to have 2 meetings while I'm driving because I'm driving anyway. I also have some meetings. It's this hyper societal pressure to become more and more efficient. But again, in the individuals that suffer, right? You or the other person, if you're both in cars, someone gets into an accident, you've lost every benefit of that perceived efficiency. The problem is, I think we just disconnect from the reality that we are putting ourselves under a real risk. That's my perception of it. I don't know if that resonates.
I agree. It's the same phenomenon. People thinking that they could do it successfully, and it's because I've done it and nothing bad has ever happened. But if you look like really critically at what's going on, you can't do it. Your driving definitely degrades, and texting carries a 23 times odds ratio risk of crashing.
It's crazy.
So that's huge. Like
right.
When you look at medical literature, if you see 23 times risk increase, that's
it's at the top of your list of things to educate people. Right?
It's mind blowing actually, and so.
But I mean, okay, so we focus on texting, absolutely should be, because that it is really like this full-blown distraction. But like, what about just, fumbling around with the radio or fumbling with coffee? Like you mentioned a bunch of odds ratios. What are some other odds ratios of things that more likely to lead to bad outcomes while driving?
Yeah.
What are they outside of using your phone? Which I think most of us understand. I think the orthopedic community has tried in many ways to really, promote this, even though I think we can be doing a lot more. What are some of the other things?
Yeah, there's ones, I think there's ones that have been discovered, and there's ones that are still being discovered as being terrible. And definitely the ones that have been discovered are texting, either sending or reading text or reading an email. Okay. I mean, they kind of group into the same type of thing. And then, as you go down the list of like egregious ones that can really hurt you, you're probably looking at handheld phones. So same type of thing, right? Now you're taking one hand off your steering wheel, and you're also like dialing the number or that kind of thing. Yeah. So you're really using, all 3 faculties that are important, the cognitive, visual, and, the tactile type thing, to do that task, and you're diverting yourself away. So those ones are typically bad. GPS is actually quite bad again, because people are trying to like go over bumps and hit 46,
Yeah.
Young Street,
Yes.
and you're totally taking your eyes off, and even that quick checkup, a lot of times it suffers from something called inattention blindness, where you're looking at the road and you may see a hazard, right? But your mind's not cognitively processing it because your thoughts are on the GPS.
Got it.
So that's called inattention blindness, where if we're able to like map your retina, yeah, sure, you saw it, but you didn't really process it.
I've seen visuals that people try to explain this, where they'll show a slide which shows, there's a woman about to cross the road with a dog. There's, someone working. There's, and then they say, okay, when you're distracted, it literally just blanks out 2-3 people and say, you just don't see them now. Like, this is what you see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's almost, you think to yourself, there's no way that's happening in your head. You think, I can't rationalize this. But that's invariably, that must be happening, right? It must be happening.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely playing with the GPS is another one. And then the handhelds are probably the top 3, handheld phones. But then once you start moving from that, like outer vehicle distractions, like there's a crash or fire trucks are screaming by and stuff, and you kind of the old rubbernecking event, those are actually quite high as well. So all these things can add up and add to your danger. And when you're saying you kind of get that masked out, appearance, and you've lost 2 of the 3 things that are hazards.
Yes.
When you actually look at your vision, in terms of like your entire visual field and what actually comes into focus, the amount that's in focus is very small percentage of your entire visual field. And in fact, you may see something hazy in the corner of your eye, but you're not going to necessarily interpret that as a danger until you like directly look at it and say, oh yeah, that is a kid crossing the street with a dog and not a cyclist going the same direction as me.
Interesting.
Right? Like, so that's in your periphery and people think they can map that. But when you're thinking about your GPS and looking down and then quickly just doing this, you're not allowing yourself the time to appropriately focus in on the actual dangers that are just about to kind of come at you. Or actually, it's probably the other way. You're coming at them, right? Because you're the one that's the danger now.
There must be a compounding effect too, and I know this may not have been able to get to that, but let's just say there's the odds associated with, let's say, texting while driving, and then there's the odds of having an accident associated with having coffee or listening to music or fiddling with that. Most people are multitasking on their distractions.
Toggle tasking.
Yes, right. So when you're doing that, I imagine that just completely adds more blind spots to your field of vision when you're driving away, right?
Yeah.
It has to add more risk, more and more risk.
Yeah. It's surprising in some of our other studies. Like we have a category for like, all 3 distractions, cognitive, and different distractions happening at the same time. So yeah, the numbers look a little bit weird because your distractions end up being more than the number of people that you collected, because there's people that have more than one distraction. So there's a lot of footnotes when you read an article like this because there's all that going on plus more.
But the message resonates with most people, right? Most people at some point in their career or in their driving career, I should say, have probably said, I got away with this. I probably shouldn't have done it. And, I haven't. So when they see this, it's alarming, but it really shouldn't be alarming. That pretty well everyone acknowledges being distracted at some point. And I guess the question I have for you is, okay, so you've got this paper. We're trying to get the message out. Clearly, you're thinking about this problem. Where are you going next with this research? Or what are some of the other things you're doing that are complementary to this program of research in DRIVSAFE?
Right, thanks. Yeah, we definitely looked at videos on YouTube and the top 10 websites when you look up distracted driving and kind of saw what they portrayed from a qualitative perspective. And they really lack the injury component and the orthopedic component, because that's my perspective. Like every single trauma orthopedic surgeon has operated on multiple patients that have been involved in a distracted driving incident. They just don't know it.
Yeah.
And so that was like a huge thing. So we kind of want to see if someone like, everyone learns on the net now, right? No one's picking up books, right? So the kids are going online, that are about to get their driver's license in Google and YouTube. And I just want to see what they were going to learn. And they learned a completely, one-sided look at distracted driving. So that was the start of it. And then getting this data from the DRIVSAFE study, and like the end result of this is that 1 in 3 people admitted to having a distracted driving MVC in their lifetime. And the actual people that were coming to the fracture clinic with an injury and were drivers in an MVC, 1 in 6 reported that they were distracted. And then when we took away the legal consequences, even though this was anonymous, about half the people admitted to close calls and they said they were distracted.
Oh, for sure.
So I think that's probably more likely the number that we're seeing. So that led us to the next question, is we just finished a study. It's not out yet, so I'm not sure I could talk about it too much.
Okay, but broadly, maybe what's the method?
So we wanted to determine naturalistically what is the rate of distracted driving, because no one knows. A lot of these studies are from crash risk data where someone has to ask the question.
And self-report, people have the halo effect, right? Like I kind of know what they want me to say, and I did it, but I don't really want to say it. I know the right thing to do is this. So you're always guessing,
totally,
right? And it's always an underestimate. In my mind, people, I mean, in this particular case, 100% is pretty well bang on. But the point is, generally, it's an underestimate. Right?
It is. And so we started doing 2 naturalistic studies. One that was published, and we called it red light because we observed drivers at red lights. And basically, an alarming number of people were distracted at red lights. So much so that 1 in 8 people failed to go when the light turned green.
So the usual behind you honk, beep, beep.
Yeah. And 95% of those people, or 90 to 95% of those people that didn't move, were distracted. So it's just huge. And that's just like one light along their trip. Like they crossed 20 lights on the way. So it was just crazy to us that this is going on. And people perceive a red light as maybe a safer spot to kind of do this stuff.
Well,
but when it turns green, and you're not moving, the other person's barreling down on you thinking you're going to go.
Yeah, for sure.
And that ends up in a rear-ended kind of thing. And it makes it look like the other person was at fault, which they still are because they have to assess it. But really, that person didn't go.
So let me ask you this. Do you think, I mean, this is obviously somewhat conjecture in your own opinion on this, but do you think some of these, do you think carrots or sticks work in, help in getting people to think about this? So, obviously sticks in this case would be, big penalties for distracted driving, big penalties, license being removed, things like that. Do you think that actually works?
There's some data to suggest that it may work in some instances to a small degree, but there's other data that shows that it may not decrease the fatalities on the road.
Yeah.
So, broadly speaking, it doesn't work enough. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And, I think it may work on some of the people that suffer that consequence, and maybe the second round, they're like, oh, maybe I'm going to put this down and, try to be a little bit more attentive when I'm driving. But I think we sometimes take the easy route. We don't always understand how dangerous it is, and people just end up doing it. So I think there has to be some element of some passive restraint happening, and then that leads
passive
to
in this particular case, meaning you get into your car and it somehow disables.
Disables
your phone or something.
Yeah, but I'm not sure anyone is rushing in industry to be the first phone that can't be used in your car, or the dashboard that shuts off.
Because the majority of the sales for cars are going to be, look at how multitasking we are for. You can do everything. Right? Through your phone. You can set up your whole system in your car through your phone. So it's almost like it's going in the opposite direction, actually.
Maybe autonomous driving cars will help solve
Bring back the Ford Model T. Bring back the Ford Model T, right? Just crank it and just go. You got nothing else. No radio, no nothing. Just get to your destination.
That's right. Well, I mean, people laugh, right? But you wouldn't see a motorcyclist. I mean, there have been examples of texting motorcyclists, which is even more crazy, I guess you could say.
There's all kinds of YouTube videos of motorcyclists.
But most of the time you don't. They don't have a radio.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't have they're not going to text. They got 2 hands on the bars and they're driving because it's even a bit more risky than having a cage around you, a metal cage around you. So you see things like that, and people think it's odd if they see someone texting on a motorcycle, but you're in charge of a 4,000-pound cannonball going down the road.
Right. And I would imagine for a motorcyclist that their greatest risk isn't them banging into someone else. It's someone distracted hitting them. I mean, I imagine that they're so defensive on the road. Now, again, we're talking about the majority of motorcyclists who are, really, they're not racing, they're not doing stuff like that. They're actually in a defensive posturing, I presume.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just need more data. We need more naturalistic data. Even when you put a camera in someone's car, as you said, their behavior is going to change.
Got it.
So our last study that we did was actually being live in traffic situations and covertly analyzing drivers when we just pulled up beside them and had a research person looking into their cabin, essentially, of their vehicle, clicking. Recording everything that's going on manually.
Yeah.
No video recordings or anything.
Yeah,
so, but yeah, so that's about to come out hopefully soon, and it's startling. It's startling, and I think that's closest to the naturalistic driving rate that we'll get in distracted driving literature, and I don't think anyone has this data just yet with this degree of people that were included, which was over, I think, 1,100.
Right, and can you speak a little bit to the funding you've been getting? It looks like you're being supported by the Ministry of Transport as well for some of your work.
Right, yeah, the Ministry of Transportation in Ontario helped fund that study, which was great. So I think that's huge because we're really lacking this naturalistic data. We don't really know what the true distracted driving rate is because it's always confounded with something else.
No, self-report is a big one.
Self-reporting is a huge one. So this is now data that is not self-reported, and we just kind of like spied on people essentially, which felt really weird, to be honest with you. You're driving up. I was the driver actually, in some of this,
you just pull up with like an overcoat, sunglasses, don't look at anyone. Person beside you slips up. Click.
So it was very interesting, and that study is about to come out. We're just finishing up a little bit of the regression, and it should come out. And I think that's going to be big for our team, I think, because I think we're going to be closest to the answer of what's truly going on the roads. Yeah. And then, the next gear, so to speak, I think is the countermeasure research of like, how do we actually change this now that we know what maybe the true rates are and how many people are affected by this. And this isn't going to be, we're going to stop distracted driving. It's definitely going to be a harm reduction.
Yeah.
But even a small amount of harm reduction in this space might have pretty big impacts.
And really, and get rid of the high risk behaviors, right? I mean, yes, there's going to be stuff that happens.
Yeah,
the high risk behaviors have to be really dealt with.
Yeah, and you can't mistake distracted driving for impaired driving or dangerous driving. That's layered on top of this.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because impaired is like you're physiologically changed or whatever because you're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, other drugs like cannabis or something.
Yeah.
And dangerous driving is, you're driving too fast and following closely and all that. And this is completely separate from distracted. So, which is like, you're perfectly capable of driving fine. You're just choosing to divert your attention, from the safe operation of the vehicle. So, I mean, when you add it all up together, it gets even scarier, unfortunately, with what people are doing on the roads. So some of this has to change because we fix way too many people, even at our own hospital, which is a trauma center. And, deep down inside me, even though it may not come out, I know a large portion of them are very, very preventable and, didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
And I can't think of any text or message or GPS coordinate in my entire life that I needed to get, without pulling over, or I needed it 5 seconds, right? After it arrived on my phone. Like I've gotten a few important messages in my life, but
everything can wait. Almost everything
can wait. Yeah. But we're conditioned now. I mean, and I think the younger kids being more at risk in literature, at least, it seems to be like an emerging theme. I mean, they're growing up with electronic social media, instantaneous everything. So I think they're definitely going to be more facile with their phones and stuff. And that's not a good picture. Actually, that's a bad picture when you think about it.
Well, Dr. Ristevski, Bill, thank you very much. And we encourage all of our members to drive safe as you would and read the article in Journal of Bone Joint Surgery. And we'll make sure we put a link out for that. So thanks so much for spending time with us today. And we're going to have you back when we get the other study that's out. I'm particularly fascinated by that one.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Mo.
All right. Cheers.